Oi, oi. All right. This episode 4 of my extended review series. Normally we look at new stuff, old stuff, other stuff in the world of music, but today we're just all about new stuff, new stuff, new stuff. That drought I was talking about last episode, yeah, that's gone. Now I'm struggling to keep up. This week we're looking at new albums from Foo Fighters, Noel Gallagher, Queens of the Stone Age, Janelle Monáe, Subtract, Country Western, Single Mothers, Billy Woods and Kenny Segal, Fred again and Brian Eno and Beta Librae as well. Let's get into it. Out of the abyss of 6 years of global tragedies and personal chaos, Queens of the Stone Age have returned with their darkest offering in years and a conclusion to the trilogy that started with 2013's Like Clockwork. Cards on the table, the Queens are my favourite all-time rock band, so this review is inherently biased. They could release an industrial noise record, and given enough time, I'd probably declare it like the next Dark Side of the Moon. So to avoid that, I'm getting my thoughts down relatively soon after release so that I can reel off some honest feedback before I learn to absolutely love everything. With that being said, I think there is a lot to love, even for the non-fanatics, especially those craving maybe a heavier sound after the band's last offering, the 2017 Mark Ronson produced Villains. There are certainly some threads continued from that record. Carnavoye feels like an evolution of the spacey lounge feel of Hideaway and what the people say has the tight wound up feel of Haunted House. But production wise, the band have dispensed with that highly compressed, vacuous sound to give real depth and clarity to the lower end, something that really benefits the rhythm section. While this album features no guest appearances, I think you could make the case this is the most collaborative Queens of the Stone Age have sounded since Songs for the Deaf. It's the first time that I can pick out compositional elements from every member of the group on every single track. John Theodore finally gets to flex his drumming prowess in the group, bringing explosive moments to Paper Machete. Veteran guitarist Troy Van Leeuwen executes a mic drop of a guitar solo in that same track. And Mikey Shoes, who's long been a silent assassin on the bass, takes a step further into the limelight with agile, interesting feels as on Sicily. Dean Fertitta, the group's sometimes synth, more time third guitarist, adds his blunt economic feels throughout. I think you can hear that on Paper Machete as well. But it is in this particular element I could be pressed to critique, because over the course of this trilogy of records, the group have gone from peppering their arrangements with a third guitar here and there to now consistently writing three distinct guitar parts. More often than not, these three playing styles work together really well and create quite a unique texture, but occasionally on In Times New Roman, the density it brings can feel a little bit caustic, leading to a little ear fatigue by the end of the album. In a sense, though, I guess you could say that only serves to complement the album's theme of like a decadent Roman Empire. Song-wise, I think the band have really delivered a great mix of straight-up Queen's bangers like Paper Machete, Peephole and Obscenery, which might take a listen or two, but when that River Runs Dry hook sinks in, you just want to listen to it on repeat, while also bringing in new elements to their sound, like the three-part CSN-style harmony on Emotion Sickness, the post-punky, new wavy feel of Time and Place, and the extremely dark and brooding Sicily. Where the album has yet to thrill me are tracks like Made to Parade, Straight Jacket Fitting, both of which feel like meandering polka-infused blues numbers that act more of a vessel for Homie's lyricism than truly captivating rockers. No doubt they'll win me over eventually, but it's just where my head's at after like the 10 or 12 listens I've had so far. On the whole, though, I think Queens have returned with an album that is well worth the wait, with some songs that offer instant gratification and those that reveal themselves more over time, all the while still sounding like nothing that's out there right now. I would give this a strong 8 out of 10. Going back as far as 2005's In Your Honor, the Foo Fighters have always needed kind of a mission or a theme to focus their latest album around. Whether it be that album looking to split rock and acoustic over two sides, following album doing that in the same songs, Wasting the Lights, Back to the Garage approach, or Sonic Highway's Travel Journal as a rock album approach. A new album then that deals with loss, pain, and all of the stages of grief feels like a mission that neither the band nor the fans would really want them to have to make. But here we are. In the wake of the tragic and untimely death of drummer Taylor Hawkins, and soon after and more privately the passing of bandleader Dave Grohl's mother, Foo Fighters have returned with an album produced in the shadow of overwhelming loss, and one that is slightly bittersweet to say their best in many years. No one would begrudge the band taking time off or returning in a more quieter, more solemn format, but here we are as neither of those things, or at least it definitely isn't quiet. Starting with Rescued and Under You, two stadium-ready radio rock bangers, is a statement of intent that both pays tribute to the rock-obsessed Hawkins, but also to the band itself. You know, as a jaded rock fan, it's really easy to be cynical of a group so commercially successful, but if you've ever attended a Foo show, you'll know playing anthems that everyone can get behind is what brought them to this point. It's what they're literally doing right now. It's what they've done before, and it's probably what they'll always do. The lyrics may be born out of mourning, but will ultimately be repeated in celebration. Those lyrics do hit though. We all lose people at some point, and whether your loss is fresh or slightly scarred over with time, when listening to this record, the odd line, if not entire songs, will give you that slight sting to remind you of it. You can practically feel the energy of all the performances here, aided by simple, raw production a million miles from the sound of the most recent records. Emotions aside, for a moment at least, while Rest is the perfect encapsulation of the ceremony of goodbye and the teacher, a passionately delivered epic, these are the tracks I'm least fond of and that feel musically a little less focused and a little more rushed. I'm totally on board with the sentiment, but I won't likely return to them often. Narratively speaking, though, these final songs do round out the album perfectly and bring what is a triumphant album in the Foo Fighters catalogue to a fitting conclusion. And I hope that the band gets as much catharsis playing this record's tracks as they've surely delivered to the fans listening to it. For me, this is a really good album. It's a solid 7 out of 10. When I first listened to this album, my immediate reaction was a pretty harsh one. I think hearing some of those perky horns and a lyric that included the word grooving, a word that we should collectively aim to avoid as much as possible. I mean, I say it, but every time you say the word groove or groovy, it just sends shivers down my spine. You know, I described it to someone as Radio 2, picnic blankets and straw hats. And to be fair, while there are a couple of moments like that, like Love is a Rich Man, that assumption I think was way off base and possibly based on my own insecurity of kind of aging into now the Radio 2 crowd. It didn't help that my expectation for the record, though, was a little misplaced. The title, artwork, and early reviews of this had me primed for a return to a raw Oasis-y, or at least Gallagher's self-titled Chasing Yesterday sound, which would have been welcome as I haven't really gotten on with the fanciful Who Built the Moon or its follow-up EPs. While I expect there is a little PR spin at play to juice streams and sales here, the back to his roots narrative is actually not inaccurate. There's a collective will among fans and the majority of the UK population to get just a drop more of that Oasis sound, but ultimately the songwriting was always the core of that band and the reason it resonated so widely. Noel Gallagher has never lost that spark for true SONG songs, but he has on recent albums, I think, become distracted by production. Council Skies doesn't abandon the creative ambition nurtured over recent releases, but it does feel like a return to songwriting proper. Dead to the World is a perfect example of this. A beautiful song, both melancholic and cathartic at the core, wrapped in strings, bass and accordion that elevate the composition to a new plane. But strip all that away and its power would remain. The fact that a song like Pretty Boy, which is more vibe and production led, does eventually find its home, shows the strength of this batch of tracks compared to previous. I found myself going from kind of puzzlement at that song's place in the track list to genuine enjoyment. The punk kid in me does still find a couple of moments a little bit too toffs at Kew Gardens Big Bash, but being honest, I'm older, I've been to a few of them now, and you know what? It's alright. You have a laugh, and as I am getting older, it's kind of hard to see what's wrong with that sometimes. I would say that this is an 8 out of 10. When an artist you really love, as much as I do Janelle Monáe, decides to take a step in a different direction, you always know, yes, it's for the best, but you have those trepidations. When announcing the record, The Age of Pleasure, it came with the sentiment that Monáe wanted to make a record that was for once low concept and about exactly what the title describes. As an Entitled fan, I felt like, yeah, but I kind of want to hear you dissect the ills of society through the perspective of an android, though. But okay, yeah, all right, we'll have this Sex on the Beach record. The conceptual aspects of Monáe's previous work have always, though, been window dressing for an artist that, at heart, is just, she's amazing. She's an incredible vocalist and a great musical collaborator. So, to be fair, Age of Pleasure is only a departure in that its objectives are simpler, just creating a summer album that you can party with. With her mainstay Wonderland collective songwriting partners on hand, this record achieves exactly that. Even when playing in different sounds, like Island Vibes for her is different, but because of that familiarity in the songwriting partnership, Janelle still shines amazingly. This album gets off to a strong start with almost every track delivering party starters. Highlights include Champagne Shit and Hot. That latter track is an exercise in brevity, a song a little over a minute and a half long that does everything it needs to in that time, and equally Black Sugar Beach is a great bridge to an otherwise jarring phenomenal, giving the pensive song a perfect place in that first part of the record. For me, the album does start to fall off past the half-mile mark, though, with songs that don't quite connect in the same way, even though the same level of care has been applied to get the flow right. But, while a little uneven, this album proves that even when Janelle Monáe wants to take off the android masks and remove the concepts and just kick back, it's still a pretty compelling listen. I would give this a 6 out of 10. This is the first Subtract record in a number of years. Technically the first since 2016 Save Yourself, but I didn't even know that record had come out. I thought it was their first since 2014's Wonder Where We Land. Sadly, rather than reignite my interest in Subtract, it's really just served as a reminder of how much things have changed in the 10 years or so that he's been away. Subtract has always kind of blended the line between alternative R&B and down-tempo-ish indie electronic. But if you look at the artists and albums we've had in both genres since 2014, even the more mainstream R&B aspects of his work feel dated in a post-blonde, post-seat at the table world. There are a couple of moments here I enjoy, like the collaboration with Toro y Moi, Days Go By, where the main track feels like a continuation of the featured artist's standard sound, but the extended outro has a very cool Subtract feel. As a producer, Subtract has definitely still got it, but I only feel like you hear this on the album when he's pushing into more adventurous sonic territory, which happens rarely. You Broke My Heart, I'ma Fix It, with its stuttery cut-up synth samples, is a great example of some exciting production, and while I don't like the Tease Dutch Town vocal on Waiting, the phase drum sound on that track is really cool. That being said, there are also some odd production choices here, like the lead synth parts on Limitless that just awkwardly plod all over featured artist Layla's vocal parts. I think overall this record just sounds a bit dated and kind of dull. I would give it a 3 out of 10. Country Western is one of the first ever bands I reviewed back in 2020 with their self-titled debut piquing my interest with a sound like punk rockers sitting around wondering what it would be like to play Heartland Americana a la Bruce Springsteen. Turns out it's that way because that's exactly what it is. Joseph Plunkett, the band's gravel-voiced frontman, got his start in hardcore, while drummer Brian QOTSA is a lifer, having drummed for many bands like Trash Humpers and Silver Jews. Forgive the City hits all the same nerves as their self-titled debut with just an ounce more beer-soaked confidence, and I mean that as absolutely no offence. Songs like Wait For It and Cussing Christians sound like a battle-tested, well-fitted blue denim jacket feels, worn in and like they've had some good times. It could be said that the album's mid-tempo numbers would benefit from a bit more dynamic range or momentum to lift you in the same way the higher octane tracks do. A track that does this actually really well is The Closer Marinero, with its Can't Cut Any Corners refrain that gives you that sentimental tingle in lieu of high tempo or like big loud moments. Overall, if you've ever felt like you like country or you might like that Americana aesthetic, but you can't let go of that need for grit and edge, this is definitely a band to get into. I last listened to Single Mothers back in 2018 with their stunning hardcore leaning Through a Wall. I completely missed that they'd released a follow-up in 2020, and so the stylistic shift on this year's Roy was initially quite difficult to grasp. On Roy, the band have dialed back the aggression to deliver a pretty straight-up rock album. Once I recovered from the whiplash, I was happy to discover some pretty catchy riffs and choruses across the record. Lead singer Andrew Thompson hasn't completely abandoned the vim and vinegar with which he delivers his lyrics. The song Quincy is a good example of the duality present on the album, with aggressively spat verses right up against a jaunty sung chorus. The band attempt this again on Airsick, however the chorus isn't quite strong enough and is a rare misstep on the album. The record has a few different moods on display, from a straight up banger like Sad Dumb Game. The riff on that is instantly grabs your attention. The post punky but light-hearted James Gandolfini, and the almost Midwest emo of Moonlight on Sunset. The latter is actually a favourite, but sadly barely over a minute long. Aside from a bit of a limp ending with Forest Fire, this album is a solid rock album, which I'd encourage you to check out if rock is your thing. I would definitely give it a strong 7 out of 10. It's fitting that the artwork for the latest collaboration between underground rap hero Billy Woods and highly praised producer Kenny Segal mimics the branding of an in-flight safety pamphlet, because this record flies through so many styles and a lot of subject matter in its 45-minute runtime. While the cover surreally skewers the safety imagery, though, the tracklist itself has clearly been assembled with care. Segal's beats run the gamut from upbeat, lo-fi and rugged, like Kenwood Speakers, to dreamy and melancholic, soft landing to dark and eerie, Year Zero, while still finding time to treat us to a number of boom bap, jazz rap-esque cuts in between. Billy Woods, for his part, uses the varied canvas laid down by Segal to touch on so many topics: gentrification, relationships, touring, and parenthood, and a bunch of other topics I'm too dense to be able to extrapolate from his ever creative and confident wordplay. It's definitely one of my rap albums for the year so far. I would give it an 8 out of 10. The current preeminent artist in managing to impress and annoy people at the same time, Fred again releases a collaborative album with ambient electronic pioneer Brian Eno, which, like Fred's social media exposure, manages to both impress and annoy me. There's lots of beauty within this very sparse, contemplative album. I think most specifically of the sounds and progressions on a track like Follow, but it's the vocalizations that make this a tough sit for me. Across the record, there are many instances where Fred's vocalizing, sometimes lyrics, often sounds, but always very cloying, sentimental tones that just fill me with that Sunday scary feeling. This isn't something against Fred, I just feel that style in general, for me, is really hard to get right. The only person I can kind of stomach it from seems to be James Blake, and even then, it has its limits. I definitely recommend checking this out if you're into ambient music, but your mileage with it may vary. For me, I just don't see myself coming back to it. I would give it a 4 out of 10. Beta Librae is the name for the brightest star in the constellation of Libra. Also the alias of techno producer Bailey Hoffman, and DAYSTAR is her third album. Techno is not a genre I know a whole lot about. Generally, I enjoy the records, but what I do find is that the songs aren't often produced to enjoy on their own terms and have been made more to enjoy as part of a mix, and DAYSTAR doesn't really do much to change that perception. For instance, Mammoth Melting Sugar is just one long break. It's crisp and clear and sonically has some decent production flourishes scattered. A song like Weavers includes some siren-like synths that are deeply hypnotic, but neither track are wholly satisfying alone and don't offer much substance. There are some tracks, though, I can get behind here, mainly the ones that flirt with an acid house style, like Megafauna and T2. Coincidentally, both of these tracks not only sprinkle in that acid sound, but offer some of the more unique arrangement and production choices on the record. The former has some of the deepest beats in the set and merges its melodic synth and perk kits seamlessly in quite a really cool way, while the latter has these cool muted guitar parts that add a unique sound compared to the rest of the album. My thoughts on T2 as a whole kind of sum up the record at its best. It doesn't really take us anywhere, but the vibe is moody and I like it. When it does reach those heights, though, the record just feels like it's missing something. All right, and that's pretty much it. Other stuff coming up in the next week on my other channels. Check them out. We've got a new series called Why Is This Good Again, which I'm excited about. Recap of the Arctic Monkey show that I went to. Vinyl updates, 23 best songs of 2023 so far. All of this stuff is on like my Insta and TikTok, as well as the stuff you see on YouTube. So check it out. Other than that, have a good week. Cheers.